Joining me now is musician Marc Labelle of Dirty Honey. Marc, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
First of all, I like what I've been able to hear from the band so far. You have the one EP, and I know about your band because I don't know what else to call him. Sort of like the guru of hard rock and heavy metal. Eddie Trunk has had you guys on a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I admit that I don't know that I would have heard you otherwise, but I'm just really glad that I've been able to find you because I'm an old man. I'm 44, so I complain a lot of the times about, like, I don't know how many, there's good bands that I've found that I think have come out in the last 20 years, but there aren't a lot of bands where I'm like, oh, I really love that band that's come out in the 21st century, and I know how old it makes me sound. But what I love about your band is it sort of has an old feel, but not in the way of, it sounds like these are actual recordings from like the 70s or whatever. So you have that kind of spirit. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of your influences and why you think that sound is a modern sound, but it has that kind of, old school feel to it.
Yeah. It's funny. I've been diving into this Tom Petty documentary, and a lot of the stuff that they recorded with Jimmy Iovine fell into our similar recording philosophy of just, capture everything together in a room, get a great performance of the band doing everything together. That's the foundation of the recording, right? And when I look back on the sound of the Tom Petty stuff that I love the sound of more than the songs, I guess. That's the stuff that really speaks to me. The Refugees, the Here Comes My Girl, the breakdown sort of songs. Whereas when he went with Jeff Lynne, it was a completely different recording process for like Full Moon Fever with Won't Back Down and Free Fallin'. And it's got this like cleaner, more polished, sound that I also definitely love, but doesn't speak to what we're doing as much, right? It doesn't sound as much like a band as it does, just something else, something more polished. So, yeah, I think when we got into the studio, that was the philosophy, capture a great performance of the band, and that's your foundation, and, just take it from there and just capture great tones and stuff. And I think, since we've been in quarantine, we've been building off of, our tones and our sounds a little more, but, still keeping that same philosophy of getting it all together. Like, everybody did it that way. So
yeah, I mean, when you think about Tom Petty's sort of body of work as a whole, I mean, sort of the age I was, the Full Moon Fever is basically when I first knew who he was, and that album's great, all that stuff. But then when you hear like the first like 2 seconds of American Girl, it almost feels like maybe in the late 80s they'd be like, no, that's a little bit too raw. We need to have a cleaner drum sound than that. But
yeah, exactly.
The song is so great exactly the way it is. And well, both work, but you're going to get a different feel from both of them. So
yeah,
I can,
totally.
yeah. One of the things that I know you guys did within the last few months is you did a cover of the Aerosmith song Last Child, which is great. Now, Aerosmith is a perfect example of another band that I first discovered in the late 80s with their Pump album. But then you go back and you're like, they're this great other band with like a completely different feel, and you can attribute that to the lifestyle they led, to put it mildly. But talk a little bit about the selection of that song and how fun it must have been to, I mean, that Last Child, when he actually says Last Child, I can't even try and do it. It's so, it's such a high register.
I know. Yeah, it's been a favorite song of mine for sure for a long time. There was a record called Little South of Sanity. It's a live live record that Aerosmith has, and the version on there just really spoke to me for whatever reason, and so did the original. But we were originally doing Draw the Line in the really early gigs of Dirty Honey, and when we went out with Slash, we were just like, isn't his favorite record, I think his favorite record of all time is Rocks, or it's the one that he sort of says changed his life and made him want to pick up a guitar. So we were like, we should do something off Rocks. I think he'd like that. And, that was sort of the catalyst for us going out and starting to play that song. And then people started telling us they love this version. And then, we did this thing for Amazon with Dave Cobb where we actually went and recorded it. And again, he had a similar philosophy of recording. His whole style is just great performers in a room with a great performance. And it came out really well. I was actually really proud of that one. And I'd wanted to work with him for a long time. So, but yeah, that's sort of how we happened upon choosing that song. It's just, we just started doing it for Slash, and he was appreciative. I found out way later. So.
Oh yeah, no, I've definitely heard him talk about, especially that era of Aerosmith, and I think the first time I heard that song was when they did it on their MTV Unplugged, Aerosmith, and there's some like great vocals on there. What the mix on that show wasn't always great, but
Right.
that Aerosmith one, I mean, an acoustic Toys from the Attic, you would think like, well, that's not going to work, but
Right.
I guess when you're Aerosmith, at least at that time, pretty much everything worked, so.
Yeah, and they're all so cool, like they can, yeah, just so long as they're all there. If they show up, it's going to be pretty good usually. So.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Now, the interesting thing, I mean, there's obviously a few interesting things about your band, but, one of the great places to start is that you don't have a record label, but the debut single, When I'm Gone, was #1 on Billboard's mainstream rock chart, which, an unsigned band had never done that before. And then your second single was #4. So talk a little bit about, I mean, when I was younger and you would hear, you would see like the behind the music, and you would see all these bands talking about, how important it was to, like Aerosmith. If they hadn't gotten a record deal, I don't think we ever would have found out who they were,
Right.
So talk about where you're at in 2020, and whether you feel like, you and the band obviously feel like it's important to have a record label, or how it's not maybe as essential as it used to be.
Yeah, I think it maybe isn't as sorry about that, as essential as it used to be, but I think it's been a great learning experience about the record business as a whole for us, not having a label. You're learning something every day from, just how things work and how to market something, and how. I think the biggest lesson we learned is that a great song, whether you have a label or not, or whatever, it can open doors that, a mediocre song with all the support, can't do. It doesn't matter. A great song is going to get its recognition no matter what. So, but yeah, I think, for us, we certainly have been out on the road with a lot of different artists, and literally none of them say how much they love their label.
Right.
And,
Sure.
And they're like, wow, like, we're really impressed with what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome that you don't have a label. We hate our label, whatever they say, but it's usually not good. Literally nobody's ever said you have to talk to my A&R guy. They're the best. So.
Yeah, and I mean, the way that, like you said, if it's a great song, you can literally text a link to your friend, you can share it on social media and be like, listen to this great song. Whereas it'd be like, hey, do you know this song that goes like this? Yeah, sit by the radio for 2 hours, maybe you'll hear it, or request it on MTV. So the way that you can kind of share a great song, it isn't like, wait, am I sharing a song by a band that has a label, or are they unsigned? You just know if you like it. And I think, there are definitely going to be some drawbacks, I'm sure, to being a band now, but that would be one of the positive things, at least as an outsider, I would imagine.
Without a doubt. And we were just talking, like, I'm fortunate to have some connections, friends that work in, film production and produce music videos all the time. And, that's been a big weight taken off, my shoulders, because I definitely sort of spearhead a lot of those things, and just getting them done and coming up with the creative elements of, music videos and whatever. But, if you had a label, obviously they'd have a network of directors and creative types to just help pitch you ideas and really be able to get things done with a lot of fluidity. And, so those are some of the little things that, and certainly if, like, you want to go on tour, the band we went out with, the Amazons, they came out on tour with us, and they basically told their label, hey, we want to go tour the States for the first time with Dirty Honey. We have an opportunity to go out with this other, young rock band. We need some money. And they're there to give them some money if they need it, if they agree with whatever they're proposing. And we certainly don't have that luxury, which would be nice to have. But at the same time, we have a lot of creative control. We can keep our masters, and, we sort of control our own destiny with our writing. So, right now, I don't think there's any plans to sign with a label.
Sure.
We're just trying to stay afloat through this tough time like everybody else. And, just see where the road takes us.
Right. And obviously, impressively, I talked about some of the chart position, but already in your band's career, you've opened for The Who, Guns N' Roses, and you talked about opening for Slash. And I mean, the Who, when you think about sort of that 50 plus year legacy, it's like 55 years now, I think. And Guns N' Roses, probably, one of the biggest bands of the last 30 years. So, how does that even get to happen? Does somebody that works with those bands be like, oh, I like this song, let's have that band? Or is that where it starts to come into play, that maybe, if you know some people who can call in a favor here or there?
Yeah, well, I mean, it starts with great management, right? So, our management company represents us, and Slash's solo project with Miles Kennedy. So, when our manager was looking for gigs for us to do, it's not a big deal to call Slash's manager and say, hey, I got a young rock band with this song. And then, of course, Slash has to approve, whoever he's going to take out. If he doesn't like it, I'm sure he's not going to give them the opportunity. But he just, he gave a call to Slash's manager, sent him the song when I'm gone. And, the next thing we know, we're getting a call from Marc Labelle, our guy, who's just like, I got you guys a gig with Slash. He loved the song, and go out there and kill it. And then it was one night in Cleveland. We did a show with him, and he was super gracious and coming up and just saying like, hey, I really love what you guys are doing. It's great for rock and roll, and I'm going to support you guys. And I think it's awesome. And we heard through the grapevine that he was just like, something about Dirty Honey. We had a lot of bands open up for us, but when Dirty Honey did it, it was just it was a better atmosphere for whatever reason. We all noticed it. Miles Kennedy's been pretty vocal about it too. So we're very grateful, but yeah, it comes with good management. There's a nice web of rock guys at Red Light, and they've all been really helpful.
And look, I know you guys have headlined plenty of shows, but opening for Guns N' Roses or The Who, like how large were those venues? I'm going to assume that, we're talking like arenas or stadiums, right?
Yeah, they were both arenas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's, it's a little different,
definitely different.
Yeah. Which, I can only imagine. That's like, oh, okay. So I can see why bands like to, pack in, I don't know, 50,000 people. And of course, when you think about that now, it's so crazy to think about, when you might be able to be in a venue of most sizes. Now, you guys were actually supposed to go out on tour pretty much right when everything started to get shut down, right? In the middle of May, I think the middle of, all these months run together. I do that all the time. I say May when I mean March. Honestly, it's kind of just been one really long month, but back in the middle of March, you guys were supposed to go to Australia, right?
Yeah, exactly. And do a record. But, ultimately the time we've been afforded has been really good for the writing. I think when we were about to go out to Australia, we had probably like 6 songs that we were really confident in that were going to, be for sure making the record. And now there's probably twice that many that we're going to have to pick from. So it's going to ultimately create a better product. It's just, I think people are getting anxious for us to put out some more new music. So, when that'll happen, I don't know, but.
Right. And I think that's sort of the good thing, especially for, bands who are working on music. You have the time to really, take in obviously other areas of entertainment. I mean, there's like movies that were done and they're like, oh, it's not going to come out for 6 months. We're going to redo the score entirely because we didn't love it, but we were in a rush to meet this date. So I think being able to take the time when you're actually able to, put it out and tour for it, I think I'm going to assume, it'll just be worth the wait. I wanted to sort of backtrack a little bit and talk about, because when I was reading about you, that I guess you started playing music when you were 4 or 5. And the reason I mention that is I have a 4-year-old son, and he will definitely hit the piano as hard as he can, but I can't imagine having any kind of discipline that you could think like, that your parents would think like, oh, you know what? He's actually pretty musical. So talk a little bit about how that came about and what sort of things you were doing when you were that small,
Yeah, it was a lot of like banging on pianos in stores and stuff like that. And I got a guitar. I don't remember exactly what age it was, but I got sort of a miniature model guitar that my dad had bought me for Christmas. And I played it nonstop, but never really took it that seriously. I mean, you can play Aerosmith riffs without an AC/DC stuff, like without a lot of proficiency with the guitar, but going in and playing some Angus and Joe Perry solos is like a totally different animal. And I never really took it to that level. I was kind of always just strumming along. And then, when I got into my later teens, I started taking it more seriously, and I'm still not exceptional at it by any means.
Right.
But I could always hold a note singing, and throughout middle school and high school, was just always getting into bands, and just really loved it, from a young age. And that's sort of how I fell into it.
Yeah, I mean, I know I not being particularly musically inclined myself, but I do understand what you're saying. It's like, okay, it's one thing to learn that opening riff to Smoke on the Water, like so many people do. Yeah. It's like, but then right after that, where's the rest?
Right.
So,
and then even if like one of my buddies is a famous actor, and he had to learn guitar for one of his roles, and I helped him out a lot with it, doing Zoom calls and stuff. He lives in Texas, and he started getting into it, and he got the itch, and he's like, I can't figure out how to play the Stevie Ray Vaughan lick with the nuance that he plays it with. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I mean, that takes like 10 years.
Yeah. Even Stevie Ray Vaughan's brother didn't play quite like that.
Yeah. So, he lives in Austin too. I've seen him many times. And, it's just, I was like, these things, to be an expert at anything really takes a lot of time. So, you just got to stick with it, and he gets endlessly frustrated with the guitar. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah. And, now you're from somewhere in upstate New York. I read that. And I grew up sort of in what's called upstate New York, because
but
it's
not really.
Yeah, but it's like where the suburbs start to get rural. Sorry, the suburbs start to get rural. So it's like in Orange County, New York, a little tiny town called Greenwood Lake. And, I grew up there, and I went to I majored in broadcasting. That's why I'm bringing this up, at Marist College in Poughkeepsie. And I know you did that. And so,
You went to Marist, you said?
I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, and that's it's a good communication school. I had a very specific track that I was on, and, I've worked in TV and radio, and it's interesting because I know you have a broadcasting degree, and that somehow leads to obviously having this great band, but then also opening for The Who and Guns N' Roses. And as I was talking to you beforehand, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm in my wife's childhood bedroom at her in-laws' house doing interviews because I can't get into studios right now.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm just sort of wondering, how, I guess obviously you were always into music. Was majoring in broadcasting sort of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I like, what was the thinking there? And were you playing music and singing the whole time?
No, I actually played lacrosse in college. That was pretty much my whole college.
Oh, wow. Okay.
choice. I got a scholarship to play lacrosse, and I changed majors a couple times from business to, I was going to be phys ed, and then I went to broadcast. I took a film class, and I really enjoyed the film class. And I was like, this is pretty interesting. And I always liked marketing too. So I just, I sort of fell into this film class and really fell in love with it, and started going down that road, and really enjoyed the marketing classes as well. And, it certainly wasn't a focus. It wasn't until I studied abroad in Florence, Italy. And that was when I got a gig at this little bar, hosting open mic nights and singing karaoke. And this Italian guy was like, you're incredible. You look up for me. I'm going to pay you. And I was like,
okay. Two things about
that. €50 a night.
Yeah. Two things about that. So I want to know, what were your go-to karaoke songs? I'm not a good singer, but if people can sometimes be impressed with the amount of excitement I have for Cheap Trick's Surrender, because if you just drag it out on the chorus, they're like, okay, he's giving it all he got. I don't know how great it sounds, but what were some of your go-tos at this place in Florence?
Definitely AC/DC, Shook Me All Night Long, and Highway to Hell.
Yeah.
There was a guy on guitar who would play along with
you. Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah. And so I go back to Italy every year. I love Italy. It's one of my favorite places in the world. And the guy is still there. Like, this is years ago. And he doesn't remember what I look like at all, but I always get up, and you know, he sees drunk people every
Oh,
night of the week,
yeah,
and
sure.
you know, probably plays with 75 of them. And I'll get up there and he'll see Highway to Hell come on, and he's like, oh, okay. And then I'll start singing with them, and he's like, the Americano, oh my God. And he kisses me on both cheeks, and he asks how I'm doing. And it's just so fun to go because he really doesn't know what's going on with
Right.
me professionally. And
Well, the thing to do will be, you know, maybe after you have a full album come out, when you go there and you're like, oh, I'm going to do this Dirty Honey song now. See if this guy knows, like, if he
if
can.
it pops up, yeah, if
Yeah.
there's a karaoke version that he can find, that'd be great.
What's the nuances for, you know, trying, you know, obviously people karaoke, you know, some of them take it seriously, and you like, you'll see the guy in the leather pants with the Robert Plant haircut, and you're like, okay, this
Yeah.
guy, this is his big night out. And then you have just, you know, idiots like me. But if you're trying, what's the difference if you're like, all right, I'm going to sing this Bon Scott AC/DC song? You sing it differently if it's a Brian Johnson song? I mean, or you just sing it like you either way?
I think what happened to me was I have a lot of vocal influences from both those guys, Brian Johnson, Bon Scott, Steven Tyler, Robert Plant, Chris Cornell, Jagger, and even like some older cats like Otis Redding and Sam Cooke. And all of that, just performing out, doing all those songs, performing for hours each night when we would play around bars and clubs. You just sort of develop your own thing, and it's in line with all those things, but it's not, doesn't sound like any single one of them really. So hey, you just kind of find your own voice within that lane and do everything in that way. And
Right. Yeah. No, no, that makes sense. It's just, you know, it's something that you think about for people who actually have like a range and don't just, you know, most nights I'm talking about when I do karaoke, you can't hear me the next day because all I do is yell. So, you know, to actually have the nuances. I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about putting the band together. You know, how you go from, you know, you're in college and you know, you said you played lacrosse. So how does Dirty Honey actually come about?
I was my best friend growing up was I had two connections to California. One I had from studying abroad in Italy. My best friend, you know, that I went to school with out there lived in San Jose. He's from San Jose. And his best friend from San Jose lived in Los Angeles. So I came out to visit everybody. I wanted to go to LA for the first time, and he introduced me to his childhood buddy. And that kid was like, you know, I got an open room. If you want to move out, you know, feel free to live in the loft. We don't care. You know, we were all young and just trying things out. And my other connection to LA was my best childhood friend from upstate New York, went to the USC Jazz School and stayed out here and lived here, and was obviously connected to the music scene. He was a great saxophone player and totally took a left turn and became a doctor at Johns Hopkins. That's another story.
Well, yeah, I
But
mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah, right. Exactly. He's a very smart guy, but kind of just a scatterbrain.
Sure.
Um, but he, you know, I was trying to get a job at a production company, and he was like, man, you know, I really think you should be singing. You know, it's LA, but I don't really hear anybody doing what you do. I think you could have a good chance at doing something out here. And let me just put some musicians around you, book some gigs, and let's see if we can't get something started. So it just organically just started booking gigs, cover gigs at bars. And John Nato showed up to sit in one night, and I fell in love with his playing immediately. And it was everything I wanted. He was like this weird mix of Jimmy Page, Joe Perry, Brian May, and like he could do it all, but was unique in his own way. And I just said, yeah, I think we should start something. He was like, I know this bass player. He's got great hair and he can play the bass. And he introduced me to Justin, and Justin introduced us to Corey, who was the final piece to, you know, solidifying like an actual unit. And, after we wrote When I'm Gone, which was a song that percolated between me and John for a long time,
Sure.
you know, things sort of took off.
So, what, you know, you put the band together, you start working on the songs. How long ago was that? And basically, how long is it between like, okay, well, we're the band now, and you're opening for, you know, Slash?
It took a while for us really to get a drummer that we all knew had the chops, but also wanted to do it more than anything. LA is just riddled with people that are trying to be Demi Lovato's, guitar player
Sure.
or whatever, that's a good paycheck, and
I mean, yeah, I mean, Nuno Bettencourt from Extreme played guitar for Rihanna for like a decade, I mean, it's like you can get one of those gigs. It's great. Yeah.
And more power to them. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that, I can't be a sideman for John Mayer right now. You know what I mean? I have
Right.
too unique and weird of a voice to to fit in with that mold. I'm not a Renaissance person like that. So I always knew if I was going to do anything, it was going to be with a band. And it took a couple years probably to get that squared away.
Well, it would make sense at finding a drummer. I mean, obviously it's sort of the easy thing for non-music people is to, make fun of a drummer. But I think if you don't have the right drummer, obviously it doesn't, I mean, look, if you're a great band and you have an okay drummer, you're going to be all right. But
Right.
I can see if it doesn't quite gel, it's like, okay, we can do cover songs with a drummer who's just okay, but to actually develop your
And
sound.
we did. I mean, we must have played I must have played with 10 different drummers doing
Right.
cover songs, and when it came to like, hey, do you want to take a risk and go throw down some of your own money and record some songs and shoot some videos and stuff, that was like, people were just kind of, oh, I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah. Well, Mark, if people want to find the music that's already out from Dirty Honey and, keep their eyes open for the eventual, full album that'll come out, or is that the plan, a full album or maybe another EP, or is it all depend on how it goes?
Is the plan right now. What the release structure of that will be, I have no idea. We got to make it first and see how good it is. But, I think we're all kind of looking at an LP as the goal. And honestly, with the stuff we've written, I think that should be the goal and will be the final product. But
I mean, if you think about it, like 2021 is going to be this year where there's going to be all these great records, some of the most amazing tours, some of which were scheduled for this year and got pushed. There's like going to be like, 20 movies all in the theater at the same time. That I kind of really want to see that, so it's going to be great when it actually comes around. But now we're just like, all right, just hang out for a while.
Yeah, there's like a push and pull happening. Like we're booking gigs right now in August, in places, more rural parts of the country. But yeah, what's going to happen beyond August into the fall, I have really no idea. It's so, I'm optimistic, but pessimistic at the same time. It's a very strange feeling to not know what the future holds at all. So.
Yeah, exactly. Just the other day, and actually it'll be paired up in the same episode where I'm talking to you. I was talking to Dennis DeYoung from Styx, and he had a new album come out, and he's like, well, I want to go out and play it live, but obviously that's just not the way it is right now. And he's in his 70s, so I get it. Or I think he is 70. I don't want to age him up too much. And I get it. It's like, it's like, sure, when the time's right, I'll definitely want to still go out there and play it. And I mean, it's also, from a ticket buying perspective, it's like, I want to, personally for me, I want to go to concerts when I feel like it'll be okay, and I think what you're talking about is sort of, rural areas, outdoor shows where, you can kind of space out a little bit. I look, I mean, people have gone to drive-in shows, they've gone to see drive-in stand-up comedy, and it's almost like whatever.
Which awful.
Yeah, no, I know I work with Dennis Miller, the comedian, and on his podcast, we had Jim Florentine, another great comedian.
I love Jim Florentine.
Used to be on That Metal Show, yeah. And he did one of those shows.
I saw that clip on his Instagram.
Yeah.
And people are honking the horn at him.
Yeah, exactly.
And laughing. I was like, this looks awful. This poor guy.
Yeah, but, I know, because like you think about, like, look, in the old day when I was a kid and when I went to concerts in like the late 80s, early 90s, you would hold up your lighter for like the big ballad. And then it turned into, let me hold up the flashlight. I guess at the drive-in show, it's like you're going to flash your brights at everybody on the stage. Like, oh, all right, this is the song I was waiting for. So yeah, it all seems like, and I know people that are like, well, I would never go to a drive-in show. I'm like, I would go just to check it out, but I wouldn't expect much from it. You know what I mean? So the idea that we'll eventually get to like, real shows on a stage, however they have to do it, it's exciting, and it's good to hear that, you'll hear about actual clubs that are booking things. And so the idea that you guys might get back out there in August, and sometime after that we'll get the album. And if they want to keep in touch with all of that, is it just dirtyhoney.com? Is it Dirty Honey on all the social media?
dirtyhoney.com. Yep. Dirty Honey, Dirty Honey Band, one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get some new music out for the people. I know everybody's anxious and ready for something new. And, there's nothing more that I'd like to do than to release a great record while people certainly have the time to digest it. Cause I think that's a great flaw of music right now, is that, some great artist puts out an album and people just have so much going on in their lives, these days, that they can't really digest a full body of work, and this is just a weird time for people to, have the time to take things in. So, yeah, we're as anxious as anybody. So.
Yeah. Well, Marc, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. I love what I've heard from the band. Can't wait to hear more. And then I also look forward to, I've never seen you guys live. I look forward to doing it one day, but not at a drive-in.
Yeah, me neither. So, yeah, we'll get back out there. It'll get back to normal, I'm sure.
Well, thanks again to Marc Labelle. The band is Dirty Honey. As he said, go to dirtyhoney.com. You'll find everything you need there. That is all the time we have for now. I'm Christian Blatt, and we'll see you next time on the Bladtcast. Thank you.